Hello and welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm your host Gordon Smith and I'm joined as usual by Jay Shabbat. In part 1 we're talking all things Emirates, and in part 2 we find out why KLM is still in a quandary. Hi Jay, how's it going?
All right, Gordon, how's it going?
Did you enjoy my alliteration in the intro there? All things
Yeah,
Emirates and then KLM in a quandary. We don't just throw this show together, you know.
very literary. Yeah, very poetic.
Two big names this week. So, yeah, Emirates to kick off in part 1 and KLM in part 2, Jay. Let's just lay out the land because Emirates is not a publicly traded company. So, we don't get financials in the quarterly basis with all of the transparency that we might get with some of the bigger names. I was going to say bigger names. Emirates is already probably one of the biggest in the world, certainly by international traffic measures. But you know what I mean? The publicly listed companies that we all know and love, because we can get really into all the details, even if they don't want us to go digging there. Emirates is a little bit different. Firstly, tell our listeners, maybe those who are new to the show, even new to the industry, why Emirates is a bit different, and then we can go into the numbers that they did give us.
Right, that's a good introduction. They are 100% owned by Dubai's government. So as a company that's not publicly traded on a stock market, they don't have any legal obligations to disclose their financial results. They do publish their financial statements once a year, but that's only after their fiscal year ends in September. So they usually publish it sometime, I guess, October, November. What we have now, what we're going to discuss a little today, is the results that they publish for the first half of their fiscal year that ends in, it would be June, right? And we have some data on that. All they really release is a press statement, a media release. So there's not a whole lot to work with there. They don't do earnings calls. They don't, they're not. They'll speak with the media, but you just don't get nearly as much information or disclosure out of Emirates as you would a publicly traded carrier,
For sure.
like most of the big airlines are. So yeah, so good point to start that off. I think it's safe to say that Emirates is performing well. They're certainly benefiting from the worldwide aircraft shortage. They're certainly benefiting from the strong intercontinental travel demand that we've seen over the past couple of years. And they're certainly benefiting from the more or less low fuel prices, although there is, for a carrier like Emirates in a very oil heavy region of the world where there's a lot of economic growth tied to oil, there's certainly a downside to low oil prices for them as well. But I think they generally perform better when fuel prices are low than the opposite. So that's the sort of the headline for Emirates. They're doing fine. No alarm bells going off. However, our upcoming feature story, and what we're going to talk about a little today, is some of the mounting challenges that Emirates seems to be facing. So, without further ado, I'll get right into them, Gordon.
Sounds good.
And
Love it. Love a challenge, Jay. Especially
yep,
when
we're gonna
especially when I can just analyze that. I don't need to sort it out myself. I can just hear and sort of talk it over with you without having to actually get around the boardroom table and say, "How on earth are we going to figure this out?"
Well, and I'm sure you're going to interject with some good questions, and please feel free at any time. But the first sort of thing I want to discuss in terms of the challenges that Emirates faces, this is something that other airlines have mentioned as well. And so Emirates didn't mention it because they don't mention anything. They don't they don't have earnings calls. They don't really disclose that much. But they clearly are feeling what I'm about to say, to the same extent that some of these other airlines, like KLM, has mentioned this. Korean Air has mentioned this. I believe Lufthansa has mentioned this. So what is this that I'm talking about? The mysterious this? Well, it's a decline or a weakness in connecting traffic into the United States, and that's specifically from markets like Africa, the Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. And you can probably kind of stretch that to Central Asia and maybe some other areas of the world as well. But those three regions in particular, Africa, Middle East, Indian subcontinent, are very relevant for Emirates, big markets for Emirates into the United States, obviously flowing through Dubai. Those markets are very weak right now because of US immigration policies, and to a lesser extent, because of, let's say, a decline in US tourism into the US for one reason or another. But clearly, the US immigration policy has tightened a lot in the past 6, 7 months. And that is, according to these carriers like KLM, like Lufthansa, like Korean Air, is really putting a strain on this flow traffic into the United States. So now, obviously, in Korean case, we're not talking about Middle East, etc. We're talking about Asia, but you get my point. Emirates is feeling this for sure. So that is one challenge that they are no doubt dealing with. I'm going to go into some just sort of broader challenges here. So obviously, they do have that giant fleet of A380s, and despite what President Tim Clark frequently says, he'll talk about how wonderful those planes are, and okay, I'm sure they got them at a good price from Airbus, and I'm sure there are, obviously, when you have, I think they have more than 100 flying right now, and they're, whenever you have a fleet that big, you're getting, to a certain degree, economies of scale. Okay, that's all well and good, but Gordon, I think you and I both know as well as anyone else that the economics of the behemoth A380s with their four engines are not exactly something that airline executives dream about. Is that fair? Am,
Depends
am
what
I being too polite?
I think you maybe are being a little polite, but we don't want to go all O'Leary on our listeners, a la last week's comments. But I think, Jay, the A380 is now a depreciated asset for every operator. So why not fly them until they can't fly any longer? Especially when you've got all the broader problems in the supply chain, not just with OEMs, but the engines, the interiors, everything else. Speak to Sir Tim Clark, and he'll tell you, even if we can get in the planes and we can get the engines and they've got all the bits and pieces that we require of them from that level, it will be the IFE that's playing up, or the next generation of business class seat or even first class seat. So there's headaches galore. So I can forgive them for flying the A380s. Plus they're a crowd pleaser. Plus they've got all that infrastructure at DXB for the 380s. And frankly, there is a point, maybe 10 years, 15 years from now, when Emirates eventually gets rid of the A380, and I think they're going to lose a little something there. I think this will be an era that people will look back on Emirates and say, you know what? Yeah, they were unwieldy, they were fuel guzzling, and they were sometimes a little dated because they hadn't had the refurbs that they necessarily should have had when they should have had them. But they were tied so closely to the brand that it's quite difficult actually to separate Emirates from the A380. So I'll personally be sorry to see them go.
Spoken like a true aviation romantic.
I've been called worse. But when we should also say that Emirates is investing heavily in premium economy. They're not here to defend themselves. But I've been on the business class, not on Skiff Stoller, I should say. In a previous life, I've been on business class on the Emirates A380. The bar is fantastic, or the lounge, I think, as they call it. But yeah, you still had a pretty aged business class product there, which was not quite in keeping with some of its Middle East rivals. So yeah, a mixed bag, let's say.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed that service as well, the A380 business class. And I remember it was on a, I don't know, 14-hour flight from Dubai to New York, and I did not want it to end. So I sympathize with your with your comments about how nice that service is. They did have, though. I was looking at this morning. As recently as just the end of last year, they've had about 20 of those still in storage. So, and I'm not sure, what the reason exactly was why, but I can imagine it's one of those things, you fly the planes if you've got the traffic and, you need to fly the route, but sometimes it's better to keep them on the ground than in the air because the economics are so lousy. But and Emirates, Mr. Clark, or anyone else from Emirates, if you feel free to dispute us, and we're all ears. If we're always eager to listen to different viewpoints if you don't agree. But it does seem like the A380 is certainly not a great asset for them. Now, one thing that's clear when you do hear Tim Clark speak is that. And by the way, have you ever talked to him, Gordon? Have you ever had an interview with him personally?
I've had a round table with Sir Tim. I have not had the pleasure of a one-on-one. He's one of my. I've got a little bingo card here, and I've checked them almost all of the big names off. And actually, David Neilman is another one that has up until now evaded me, but I'm delighted to say he's joining us at the Skift Aviation Forum in Dallas, Fort Worth next month, December 3rd. He will be there, and I think as the agenda currently stands, I'm due to be on stage with him. I know there's a few moderators in the mix, but yeah, that'll be another one. But short answer to a short question, Jay. David Neilman, yes, coming soon. So Tim Clark, not one-on-one.
I was going to say when he does speak publicly, recently I've heard him. The frustration is clearly like dripping off the tongue with respect to the 777 delays.
Oh yes,
They've just been waiting and waiting for these 777, 8, and 9s, and remember that those are designed to replace the A380. So clearly, his eagerness to get those 777s probably indicates the eagerness to get rid of the A380s. But anyway, and I shouldn't say get rid. They'll be in the fleet for a long time. They have looks like 107 currently in service according to Cirium Fleets Analyzer. So they'll be around for a while, but they are. But clearly, when the 777s come, they'll be the economics will be greatly upgraded. So moving on from fleet issues. Well, before I move on, I should say that they are moving in general to fleet, let's say, down gauging. And that's not just moving from A380s to this new 777. They're also introducing A350s now. They're starting to come in. And then eventually they'll start getting 787s as well, which is, much smaller plane. So you can see where maybe their planes are not, the planes are too big for what they really ultimately want to fly. So that'll change over time, but it will take to take years. So now I will proceed to move past the fleet issue. I'll mention this one fact that I actually posted a chart of what I'm about to say on LinkedIn. Some of you may have seen this, but it surprised me that Emirates, by however you want to measure it in size in terms of number of seats, ASKs, number of flights, they are smaller today than they were in 2018, let alone 2019. So you have to even 1 year before COVID, and that fact is interesting for a number of reasons. I mean, one, when you're not growing, obviously that has some economic implications. You get reverse economies of scale when you're shrinking. They are starting to grow back into their footprint from where they were in 2019, but they're not there yet, or 2018. They're not there yet. I should say that the Dubai airport is a constrained airport. So it's not like they can just grow at will. I mean, there are limits there. They eventually will move over to the new airport, but that's
yes.
going to be a much bigger project. And yeah, if you want to say a word about that, you can. But the last thing I want to say about the growth situation for them at Dubai is that even though they're not growing, Fly Dubai is growing very fast, and not even just with the narrow body 737 Maxes. Soon they'll be getting 787s as well. So just for anyone who's not clear, Fly Dubai and Emirates, you can sort of think of them as sister airlines. They're both wholly owned by the Dubai government. And I don't exactly know to the extent that they cooperate, how much joint planning and joint marketing and joint fleet, all that stuff they do. You have to imagine they're, pretty close to each other. So there does seem to be a concerted effort among who's ever in charge in Dubai's aviation, that Fly Dubai is the entity where we want to allocate more of the growth. So that I thought was something interesting. Now I don't know, Gordon, did you want to say something about the new airport before I mention one more challenge?
No, go ahead, Jay. I was just going to very briefly say that Dubai World Central, which is to the south of the city, already exists. It's got a handful of charter and cargo flights. That's going to be the home for the new Dubai International as we currently know it. That was around 2032. I was speaking to Paul Griffiths, the CEO of Dubai Airports, last month, and that was a 101 and 2, if anyone's keeping track of my 101s. And he said, yeah, we are going to have a little bit of a crunch time between what we now know as DWC coming online and DXB continuing to grow, because like you said, Jay, it is getting pretty close to capacity. And he said, the quote here was, clicks, not bricks. So it's not going to be physical infrastructure per se. It's going to be smarter technology, enabling the airport to handle more passengers in a more efficient way, more aircraft in a more efficient way. So getting more, squeezing more out of the existing facility, as opposed to building anything in a stopgap sort of way ahead of DXB closing and DWC getting fully operational. But he did also say that it was likely Fly Dubai would probably be moving down the road first.
Very good. Yeah. And I mentioned the US immigration policies. I mentioned some of the issues with the fleet. I mentioned that Emirates is not growing anymore. I have a few other challenges that, again, we'll discuss in the feature story in more detail. There's one more I want to mention here today. And I guess it's a good opportunity to say that we're speaking on Tuesday morning, New York time. We will be, by the time you listen to this, be a couple of days later. But the one final challenge I did want to mention here is on the competitive front. Emirates does have some new, let's say, some new things to think about. So and I think the one that stands out is Indigo, and how so much of their hyper ambitious growth strategy is premised on taking people from India to the rest of the world, so that they don't have to connect through places like Dubai. And so Emirates is, eventually this is going to take years to roll out. They're only just starting to get wide body airplanes now, Indigo, and they're flying to a few places in Europe, and just from a few routes, few frequencies. I don't think it's making a material dent on Emirates business yet, but it's something that is clearly on their radar screen. Air India is growing too as well. Of course, we know that Air India traditionally has been less of a formidable competitor that Indigo seems like it's shaping into. So you do have that competition from the Indian subcontinent, which is a huge market for Emirates. At the same time, you do have Turkish Airlines still growing. Don't forget about Pegasus either, which moves a lot of people through Istanbul from, say, Europe to Middle East, Europe to parts of Africa. They're not flying to North America, but that's still a competitive challenge too. And these Turkish carriers are growing really, really quickly. Don't forget about Qantas, Project Sunrise. I know you've been writing a lot about that and following that closely,
Yes.
Gordon. Yep. And don't forget about, closer to home, what's happening within the Gulf in neighboring Saudi Arabia, for example. You have Riyadh Air launching with a monstrously ambitious fleet plan. You possibly could get some of these new A321 XLRs, reaching into the Middle East. I know Wizz Air wanted to do that. They're pulling back some from that. But there's, if you look around, there's a lot of competitive developments that Emirates is going to have to pay close attention to.
Yes, thank you for your early plug for my upcoming Skift feature looking at Project Sunrise. That is due to be published as it currently stands on the 23rd of
Coming soon
November.
to a theater near you.
Coming soon, coming soon. It's shaping up nicely, if I do say so myself. So keep an eye on that, Jay. Anything else to add on Emirates? Obviously, much more detail in the issue coming up.
Yeah, only that. Only to caveat that by saying that despite all of these negative things I've been talking about, I don't want anyone to lose sight of the fact that Emirates still retains a lot of very, very formidable strengths. And for those of you who've been reading Airline Weekly over the years, you're familiar with them. But just to be brief, I mean, you can start with all the government support that they get, and that includes some of the things I mentioned. The very prolific investment in aviation infrastructure, and the supportive tax regime, and all that. Dubai has tremendous geography. We know that Dubai's economy is tremendously dynamic with not just the tourism and the energy, but just businesses from all over the world that have operations there. And then don't forget of all the investment and development that's happening in nearby places like Saudi Arabia, and you also have activity like what's happening, reconstruction of Syria, for example. So there's just a lot of very positive things either going on in Dubai and nearby markets, and also just positive uh, just characteristics about the Emirates business that remain very much intact. So I'll leave it there.
The rising tide lifting all boats, Jay.
Yep, that could be the case for other Middle Eastern players too, as they develop. Of course, when you get into that topic, there is the possibility that some of these uh, neighboring countries are maybe over investing, and Saudi could be an example of that. Riyadh Air could be an example of that. But that has nothing to do with Emirates. We'll leave that for another day.
Indeed, indeed. One for another day. Emirates isn't here, of course, to defend itself, but it does have a little section on its website called The Subsidy Myth. And it says, our long-standing position is that we are opposed to state aid as a tool to keep inefficient airlines afloat or other forms of airline subsidy that artificially distorts the market. And some of our regular listeners and regular readers might remember that back in 2015, Delta United and American made some allegations around financial support and everything else. And there was quite a meaty dossier, actually, 388 pages. And I have to wonder, Jay, anyone that's really in the weeds of the industry knows 388 is usually A380, 800. So I wonder if that was complete coincidence or if that was just how it turned out. Who
You're
knows?
very, very suspicious, Gordon.
Well, 388, that's like sort of like a 747-page document for BA back in the day. I don't know.
But I should say that not all government subsidies are created equal. I mean, there's a big difference between building a really good airport for your home airline and charging them a low rent versus hurling a bunch of money at Alitalia so that their unions could take longer breaks. I mean, there's different extremes. I mean,
Indeed.
there's a whole range of government subsidy types that you can find throughout the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone does
some positive, some negative, some good for airlines, but not the economy. Some good for both, some bad for both. So, it's a wide range.
It is indeed, indeed. If anyone else wants to read a little bit more about Emirates' defense, you can go to the Emirates website there, the subsidy myth, and it says, as a major stakeholder, I sound like Sean Connery, the late Sean Connery, as a major stakeholder in international aviation, we welcome a robust, fact-based debate on the issue of airline subsidies. And if you're struggling to sleep, there's that 388-page document which you can flick through. That's from a few years ago, but I'm sure there are lots of relevant points still in there, Jay. Okay.
I wasn't going to reveal this, but folks, anyone who's listening, Gordon is in the running to be the next James Bond. That's all I'm saying.
There is a vacancy, isn't there? Daniel Craig's not doing any more.
Yeah, I think you should go for it.
Well, so Pierce Brosnan, he was, I think, Irish. Sean Connery, the late Sean Connery, he was Scottish. George Lazenby, Sir Roger Moore. I'm trying to think if there's been another Scottish James Bond. I think the answer is no. Anyway, I will leave that for you to muse in the break. But before the break,
all right. I can't resist one more. Who's your favorite James Bond? You have a favorite? Mine is Roger Moore, only because I kind of grew, and when I was growing up, he was the James Bond, and so I just have like a lot of good memories of him in those movies. People say that I'm sure people swear by Sean Connery, or maybe younger people like Pierce Brosnan, but Roger Moore is my guy.
Yes, Sir Sean is the original and the best in my book. But I also grew up with Pierce Brosnan. The first one I remember watching properly was GoldenEye in the mid-90s, and it was all set around the collapsed USSR and everything else. I loved it, and there was a great Nintendo 64 game as well based on that film GoldenEye. So that was a fun one, but absolutely nothing to do with aviation. Although there was a scene actually where he gets a little, I don't know if it's a little Cessna or something, maybe even something smaller than that, and he escapes some nuclear facility or something, and he flies off the edge of the mountain, and you think that's it, Pierce Brosnan gone, and then He comes and saves the day. He just falls off the cliff in his little airplane and then comes back up.
I remember that scene.
Yeah. I'm not describing it particularly well, but maybe over the holiday season, you can dig out the DVDs or just go to your streaming service of choice and flick it out. GoldenEye, yeah, 1995, 96, something around that. A quick reminder before the break, podcast at skiff.com, podcast with an S at the end. If you've got any questions or comments for us, please don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast wherever you're watching or listening. And if you are enjoying the show, please rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review so we can continue to spread the word about the Airline Weekly Lounge. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm Gordon Smith, joined as usual by co-host Jay Shabbat. Part 1, we were discussing Emirates. Part 2, we're going to briefly touch on KLM, Jay, because we had some numbers out of the broader Air France KLM group last week as we're recording here. And we should say that Air France and KLM, very, very significant airlines in their own right, but we've obviously got different fingers in different pies now. We've got Transavia, we've got some of the engineering divisions, which there have always been. SAS, that's going to be an interesting one to watch as that stakeholding increases. But we're focusing particularly on KLM here. And you might be thinking, oh, Ben Smith, yes, but he is the CEO of the Air France KLM group. So you've got Anne Rigel, who's the CEO of Air France specifically, and KLM is Marjan Rintel. She's the CEO there. So just a little laying of the land. You were discussing press releases at the start with Emirates and how that's what we get from them. We obviously get the full financials, warts and all, from KLM, but there is obviously a media release that goes with it. And these things are usually sugar-coated. At this time of year in particular, during earnings season, Jay, my inbox, you receive up to a dozen of these every single day from various airlines of all various colors and descriptions around the world. But one thing that is generally fairly sort of, I don't want to do any injustice to our colleagues who work in the PR and communications industry, but usually it's pretty sugar-coated in terms of the headlines, and then you actually get to dig into the details when you look into the spreadsheets and the charts. KLM, I don't know who was writing this. All credit to you, more power to you. The headline was, no recovery yet for KLM Group in the third quarter. No sugarcoating, not even a dusting, Jay. What did you make of the numbers?
Yeah, I was taken aback by that too when you had sent me that press release, and I was like, "Wow, that's no sugarcoating." You said it. It's was very, very negative. And I think probably the reason why they wanted it to come off as negative is they're probably trying to get the attention of the government and anyone who might influence the government. Because one of the big problems there, and we'll probably get into this a little bit, is that government policies in the Netherlands are just crushing them. I mean, they're really, so if you go back, I mean, Air France overall, I'll tell you, just in this summer, they had a decent quarter, 13% operating margin. Lufthansa Group was 12%, so they're right there. I won't tell you what IAG did. I don't want to embarrass them, but okay, I'll tell you, 22%. So IAG is just kind of in their own stratosphere. But Air France, Air France KLM 13.1%. But what's interesting is that if you go back before COVID, let's go 2019, for example, late 2010s, Air France was always kind of the weak link. I used to say, like, Air France KLM had a French problem, but the Dutch part of their operation was really, really, really strong. What happened? It's now the opposite. So what's happened just in the kind of post COVID period, 2022, 23, 24, 25, Air France has really made an awesome turnaround. So Air France by itself had a 14% operating margin, so they did better than the group average, and that was pretty good. And that reflects a lot of, you can go back to how they were able to accomplish that turnaround. There's a lot of fleet right sizing, simplification of their fleet, of their seat configurations. They've done a lot of restructuring of the Paris hub. They've eliminated a lot of their short haul routes, but I know we're particularly domestic routes, money losing domestic routes. But I know we're not really focusing on Air France right now. We're focusing on KLM, and what's happened there is just the opposite. They were kind of the superstar performer. They were kind of Air France KLM's version of what Swiss is for Lufthansa. The airline that always produced these really, really high margins. But that's now reversed. They only had a 9.5% operating margin this summer. And that was basically the same as what the Lufthansa mainline, or I guess they're calling it now Lufthansa Classic did. And that's, we've talked before, Gordon, about how Lufthansa Classic has all sorts of problems with, they were behind on getting their new planes and their new premium products and et cetera, et cetera. But at KLM is, if you, KLM and Lufthansa Classic are now kind of the two sick puppies of the European airline industry, at least among the, within the big groups, the big aviation groups. And in KLM's case, I just mentioned that one of the big problems is that the government has just been piling on tremendous taxes. The airport fees have gone up and up. There have been, limits to the number of flights that can operate from Amsterdam Airport. So just been very, very difficult for them. They also had some labor issues this past quarter. Their costs are going up faster than, let's say, Air France's cost. So a lot of issues there. Now they ran into the same problem that I talked about with Emirates, and I think I mentioned that KLM specifically attributed some of their problems to this, and that's that U.S. immigration policy change that I
Yes.
mentioned. They're seeing a lot a lot less connecting traffic from places like Africa. Remember, they're very big in East Africa, big in the Middle East, even India. A lot of that stuff that used to flow through Amsterdam into the United States, to Canada, to even some, probably South Atlantic as well. A lot of that stuff, well, the United States is specifically being impacted by the immigration policies and also the decline in tourism into the United States. And then, just more broadly, the fact that Amsterdam is becoming such a, much more expensive airport, they're just attracting they're just getting priced out a lot of that, a lot of that connecting traffic. Particularly, I mean, think about how competitive some of that stuff is. I mean, if you're going from India or the Middle East or Africa to, to Dallas, think about how many options you have. You can go through Dubai, you can go through, Europe, you can go through, other hubs in the Gulf, and go through Istanbul in some cases. So Amsterdam always relied on being like cost competitive, and Amsterdam is just not anymore. And so losing traffic because of that. So that's a big issue. The final thing I'll say about KLM and their challenges. So if you go back to the pre-pandemic times, Air France was the carrier that always suffered from having too many premium seats. And, they had first class and too many business classes in a lot of places. I remember, this was many, many years ago. I used to work for Air France, and for the actual premium, the first class seats, the highest, the most expensive seats, it only worked on like a handful of routes. I remember you can justify it on New York, maybe Los Angeles, maybe Miami in peak season. That's about it. So they had that problem of having too many premium seats. Now KLM has exactly the opposite problem. They don't have enough premium seats. So Air France now finds itself in this post-pandemic world where everybody's flying premium. They're just in the right place at the right time. And, think about Paris. We talk about how premium leisure is like the hottest market in the aviation world right now. What better example of a premium leisure tourist destination can you think of than Paris, right? So Air France is just like smack dab in the middle of that golden, place to be. Whereas KLM, just the opposite. They were always a carrier that relied a lot more on economy class traffic. So they're scrambling now to get as many, premium seats, premium economy seats, whatever, into their aircraft as they can. But as Lufthansa is learning, with all their aircraft delays, you just can't do it fast enough. So that's another big reason why KLM finds itself in this difficult position, and I guess why they're issuing these very gloomy press releases.
Yeah, great analysis, Jay. If anyone's keen to learn a little bit more about the perspectives from Ben Smith and from Carsten Spohr, the CEO of Lufthansa Group, you might recall last month they had a joint interview with Les Echos and FAZ, the German newspaper out of Frankfurt, and it was the first time they ever spoke out in an interview like that. You might have seen them before IATA or Airlines for Europe, as part of sort of podium setup. But this was quite a unique intervention, and that was really to push back against Gulf rivals. And there were some interesting numbers in there, which we don't have time to go into, but I did write about that in Skift and in Airline Weekly last month. So jump into the archive there if you want to take a look at that, Jay. Before we go, I want to give a little plug as well to something that we are doing with Megna next Tuesday. So as we are recording here on the 11th of November, it is on the 18th of November. So we're calling it a webinar. I think the term webinar is a bit dated. It sounds a bit like sort of early 2000s. But anyway, a webinar is what we're calling it. And the title was Airlines in 2026, Flying into Trouble, ? That's not a statement. That's a question. This is on Tuesday, 18th of November. Various time zones for your consideration here. 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. GMT, 5 p.m. Central Europe time, and anyone joining us in India, 9:30. And yeah, really excited for this one, Jay. It's free of charge. If you just jump onto Jay's LinkedIn or the Skift LinkedIn or Airline Weekly's LinkedIn, you'll find a link there. Register. We've got hundreds of attendees already signed up. Really looking forward to it. Anything to add on the webinar, Jay?
Well, just urge people to come with questions. We'll have time for those, and we'll be happy to attempt to answer anything that's on your mind about any of these topics that we discuss in either our issue or our presentation or in our podcast. So yeah, please come armed with questions.
Absolutely. 18th of November, various time zones as discussed. And then another final plug for the Skift Aviation Forum, December 3rd in Fort Worth, Texas. If you looked at the agenda a few weeks ago and thought, hey, that's pretty good, it's got even better. I know the programming team are putting the final touches to that now, Jay. And without going into too much detail, it is. I'm getting really excited now. You might say, well, you're biased. It's your show. But no, I genuinely am. There's some voices that we've got attending who I haven't seen appear anywhere else. We're going to get some really interesting perspectives. We've got the big names and the blockbuster names and everything else that you know and love. But genuinely this year, maybe more than any other, the agenda is shaping up to deliver insights that I honestly don't think you will get any other forum, conference, exhibition of its kind. Live.skift.com. If you're an Airline Weekly subscriber, you get one complimentary in-person ticket. And if you're not an Airline Weekly subscriber, that's okay. You can buy a ticket the traditional way. We look forward to seeing you in Fort Worth on December 3rd. Right, that's all we've got time for the Airline Weekly Lounge this week. My thanks to Jay for that mammoth analysis of Emirates and KLM. Thanks also to our producers, Monica and Will, and wherever you are in the world. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Whether you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. This really helps us get the word out about the Airline Weekly Lounge, so we can continue to bring you this podcast every week, absolutely free of charge. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skift channel and hit the notification bell to find out whenever a new video drops.